So in the last section, we installed both Genymotion and VirtualBox. All we need to do now is install them. So in my downloads folder, I've got the Genymotion installation here. I'm going to go ahead and double click it. I guess verifying takes a while. And we get this window that pops up here. So to install Genymotion on OS X, it's really straightforward. All we have to do is click Genymotion, and I'm going to drag it over into Applications. I already have Genymotion installed here, so I'm not going to go through the process, but it should be just as simple as dragging and dropping. You do not need to do anything with the Genymotion shell here, so you do not need to install Genymotion shell unless you want to. Once I've gone through the Genymotion install process, I'm going to close this window, and next we're going to install VirtualBox with the other installer that's right here. I'll go ahead and double click. I guess verifying takes a while these days. Can't imagine what it's verifying, but there you go. All right, fantastic. So unlike the Genymotion installer on OS X, we're not going to do drag and drop here. We're going to double click on the package file, and that's going to bring up this installer here. So I've already gone through this installer, so I'm not going to continue here, but it's a very easy installer. Just go through the continue steps, and it will install VirtualBox for you. All right. So that's the process for installing Genymotion and VirtualBox. You may agree with me that downloading them is much more challenging than actually installing them, somewhat ironically, I guess. Okay, so this is kind of the moment of truth now. We have Genymotion installed, which is our Android emulator, and we have VirtualBox installed, which is a dependency of Genymotion. So let's do the moment of truth here. I'm going to go ahead and open up Genymotion. All right, so you'll probably see a window that looks just like this. You will not have these two virtual devices here. Don't sweat it. We're going to add one right now. So the way that Genymotion works is we set up different emulators or different simulators, right? With Xcode, we only have one simulator ever running at a time, and we can change the type of device that the simulator is, you know, from say an iPhone 5 to an iPhone 6 or a 6S or what have you. In Genymotion, it works somewhat similar. We add different devices, and then we can preview our application on those different devices. So you can see that right now I have two different devices installed. I've got a Google Nexus 5 that's running Android 6 version 23, and then it shows the screen size on here as well. So if you so chose, if you wanted to test your application on different size devices, you can create multiple emulators here. For our purposes, we're just going to be running a single emulator. You know, we're going to be testing on the Google Nexus 5. If you want to use a different device, no problem, go for it. For our purposes, generally, you know, you want to be making sure that you've got a reasonable screen size for testing on your desktop. You also want to make sure that you're running usually a more recent version of Android than an older one. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a new emulator here. So I'll click Add. And then we get a pop-up here of all the different types of simulators that we can set up. And you can see that there's just a fantastic quantity of them here. Again, it's up to you which one you want to install, but I highly recommend that you install one of the more recent versions of Android. So, you know, something closer to 6 as opposed to Android 4. So I'm going to go ahead and install another Google Nexus 5X here. So I'm going to just click it, and then I click Next. And you can stick with the default name here. I'm just going to add on Test because I've already got a couple versions of the same simulator. I'll click on Next. And if it's your first time doing the Genymotion setup, it may need to go ahead and install additional file for that particular version of Android. You know, don't sweat it. It should only take a minute or two. For me, I've already got it installed locally, so I am just go ahead and click Finish here. And you can see that I then get Test popping up right here. Okay, so go ahead and select the new simulator that you got, and then on the top left, I'll go ahead and click Start. So this starts the emulator, it starts the simulator up. So you can see, starting virtual device, it's going through some boot process here. If you get any error messages right here, obviously, there's gonna be a point where you wanna do a little bit of troubleshooting. Okay, so while this initial setup process here is going on, I'm going to also open my terminal back up. I will open a new window. I'm going to change directory into our authentication project, and then as before, I'll run npm run start, and then in a separate window, once the packager is finished running, and it looks like it is, I see React packager ready. I'm still doing a little bit more work there. Okay, looks good. So now in a second window, I'll go ahead and run the command react native run Android. So what this command is going to do is it's going to take our newly generated project, it's going to bundle it all up, and it's going to automatically try to deploy it over to the running simulator over here. So we have this simulator, it's running on our machine just off in space. React Native is going to automatically hook into it and attempt to deploy the application to that emulator. So let's go ahead and hit enter here, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope nothing goes wrong, because you never know. So while this the build process here, the very first time you go through it, it takes a little bit of time to go through. So while that's running, I want to talk a little bit about the simulator over here. The simulator is a little bit more primitive than the one that you're used to with Xcode. So some of the graphics might be a little bit fuzzy on here. Might look a little bit pixelated. If it does, don't sweat it. That doesn't mean your app is broken. It's just because of the resolution scaling. The other thing to keep in mind is that back on the simulator with Xcode, we had that really handy shortcut of Command R to refresh the simulator, to automatically go and grab new JavaScript bundle. We don't have the benefit of that in the simulator here. In order to do a refresh in this simulator, we have to open up the menu within the simulator and then click a button that actually says, hey, please refresh the JavaScript for me. And I'll show you that in just a second. To get access to that menu, it's the actual menu button on an Android device. On the left-hand side, you'll see, or excuse me, the right-hand side, you'll see this toolbar over here, and there's this kind of grip right here in the middle right. So I'm going to take that grip and drag it up, and that's going to expose all these other buttons right here. So do not, miss these other buttons over here. They are total necessity for doing some development. So the actual menu button is this little paper looking thing right here. So you can press the paper thing, and you can see right there, menu, to open up the JavaScript menu, excuse me, the React Native menu once we're within our application. And then we can use that menu to go ahead and update or go and grab a new version of our JavaScript bundle. So on the left-hand side here, it looks like the build just finished. It hooked into the Android simulator automatically, and my application is starting to do some initial transform here. This process is much faster on subsequent builds. It's only this first time that it takes this full 2 minutes here, and then this also this additional transform step up here. While that's finishing up, I'm also going to open up my code editor. Oh, and there we go. We've got our application successfully running on Android here. And you'll see that it says to get started, edit index.android.js. So you may, at this point, be very accustomed to making changes to, You may be very accustomed to making changes to index.ios.js. So this is starting to be, where we delve into development on the two different platforms. Changes to index.ios.js, as you might imagine, solely affects the iOS version of our application, whereas if we want to make changes to Android, we're going to make changes to index.android.js. So in here, inside of index.android.js, I'm going to find the line that says welcome to React Native, and I'll add on no iOS required. And then I'll save this. And then back in the simulator, I'll click on my menu button, and you can see the menu pops open here, and I will reload JS, and sure enough, my text updates. Awesome. Just to prove a point here, I'm going to go over to index.ios.js. Notice that there's no text here, or nothing that says anything about no iOS required. Let's say I'm an iOS app. I'll save this, and then I'll reload it over here, and you can see no change. So when I'm inside of index.ios.js, the code inside of here does not affect the Android version of the app in any way, shape, or form. Only changes to index.android.js make changes to the Android version. Okay, so this is been quite the process to go through. There's just one last little thing I want to talk about here, and that is to rerun the simulator. So we did a tremendous amount of setup to get here, and so once we close the simulator here, maybe we go home for the day and we want to start it up tomorrow, we don't have to obviously go through all that installation process. All we have to do in the future to get the simulator back up is to open Genymotion, start up our emulator. That will start up this window over here. Then we do npm run start to start the build package, and then we do React Native run Android to package the app up and deploy it to the running emulator. So, after doing the initial setup, it gets a lot easier to run the Android app in the future for getting started with development again. Okay, so quite the whirlwind here. As I said previously, if you do not have Lux installing the simulator, do not sweat it. You can still run this entire application. All this code that we're going to write, the entire application can still be ran from Xcode. If you did not have luck with the Android app, please continue in Xcode instead. You can troubleshoot some of the Android stuff on the side, and you can always deploy to Android later on. We're not going to be writing very much Android-specific code here at all. As I mentioned, this is going to be a platform-neutral app that we're building, so it can really span both applications at the same time. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get to work with developing our app in the next section.